The U.S. Navy has relieved the USS Fitzgerald's commander and 2 other senior leaders of their duties, and it's also praising the crew for saving their ship after the destroyer collided with a large Philippine-flagged container ship off the coast of Japan on June 17. It was also evident from this review that the entire Fitzgerald crew demonstrated real toughness that night, the Navy said. Following the collision, these sailors responded with urgency, determination and creativity to save their ship. Quotation mark. Inadequate leadership and flawed teamwork contributed to the crash, the Navy said after releasing the findings of its investigation into the crash. It also blamed poor seamanship by the crews of both the guided missile cruiser and the ACX Crystal, whose gross tonnage was triple that of the U.S. ship. 7 members of the Fitzgerald's crew died in the collision, which bashed in a large section of the ship above the waterline and caused extensive damage below. Water poured in through a large gash near its keel, a 13 by 17 foot opening that was made by the cargo ship's bulbous bow, as sailors responded to an emergency around 1:30 a.m. Through their swift and in many cases heroic actions, members of the crew saved lives, the Navy said. The report found that the sailors responded to flooding, structural damage and reports of a fire as they worked to restore the ship's power, propulsion and guidance. The damage spanned 2 decks, and water poured into the ship, particularly into berthing 2, which held 42 beds and a lounge for the crew. By the time one sailor jumped from his top bunk, the water was chest high, the Navy says. Of the 35 sailors who were in berthing 2 when the ship was struck, 28 escaped the flooding and 7 sailors died. The area flooded in a span of 30 to 60 seconds. The ship's commanding officer, Commander Bryce Benson, was trapped in his cabin, which was hit by the Crystal's bow. After sailors used a sledgehammer, kettlebell, and their bodies to break through the door, the amount of debris forced them to remove the door's hinges to pry it open enough for a person to squeeze through. Those who entered could see night sky, looking through an opening of ripped steel and shredded wires, according to the report. A helicopter was later used to take Benson to a naval hospital in Japan. After the crash, the Fitzgerald switched over to using paper navigation charts due to a loss of its systems. The damage limited the Fitzgerald's maximum speed to 5 knots and gave the ship a 5-degree starboard list. After it arrived in port, divers recovered the bodies of 7 crew members. A helicopter was later used to take Benson to a naval hospital in Japan. After the crash, the Fitzgerald switched over to using paper navigation charts due to a loss of its systems. The damage limited the Fitzgerald's maximum speed to 5 knots and gave the ship a 5-degree starboard list. After it arrived in port, divers recovered the bodies of 7 crew members. Benson had already been temporarily relieved of his duties due to injuries he suffered in the crash. He's now being reassigned to the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C., where the Navy says he'll be able to receive medical care. Several junior officers were also relieved of their duties, the Navy said. Footage and images from the Japanese TV network NHK showed heavy damage to the mid-right side, starboard, of the USS Fitzgerald and less severe damage to the left side, port, of ACX Crystal. The Crystal is 29,060 tons, W out cargo, and is 222.6 meters, 730 feet, long. The land-based equivalent of a freight train, Crystal, hitting a school bus, Fitzgerald. By all rough photographic appearances, the port side bow anchor of the Crystal impaled a portion of the Fitzgerald near starboard side amidship just below her bridge.
In the wake of the USS Fitzgerald collision that claimed the lives of 7 sailors, the Yokosuka community gathered to honor their shipmates and show respect for the families. More than 2,000 sailors and family members attended a memorial service where they lined the streets to pay their respects.
We come together with heavy hearts to honor the bravery and heroism exhibited by the crew of Fitzgerald. The circumstances that bring us here were nothing we desired, but the crew's response was everything we could have hoped for. The loss of America's 7 best leaves an emptiness within us that compounds our grief.